You're listening to the Mind Your Business podcast, episode number 15.
Today we're talking about doing scary shit in your business, so stay tuned.
Hi, I'm James Wedmore, and I've built a 7-figure internet business that offers the financial freedom to do what I want, when I want. And I'm the first to say that hard work and hustle are not essential ingredients for your success. So, how do you build a thriving business from the inside out? This is the Mind Your Business podcast, featuring myself and co-host Phoebe Mroczek. All right. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, James Wedmore.
And I'm your co-host, Phoebe Mroczek.
And today we're talking about doing scary shit.
Uh-oh. What is this episode going to be about?
You know, I'm excited to talk about this because this is one of those episodes that kind of bubbled up through the work that we have done on this show. So before we get into today, what we want to talk about, I just kind of want to check in with Phoebe and just what you've been up to and kind of what we've been up to with the show.
Yeah, so for what we've been going through, I know you were saying that, you know, this is kind of bubbled up. And I think the reason is because we were doing scary shit. This podcast was something that I think we both were a little bit nervous about. We weren't sure how it was going to be received. And it has just been awesome. All the feedback we've gotten, the reviews, it just did so much better than we expected. So I'm feeling amazing. How are you feeling?
Well, I'm feeling great now.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, at the time of this, just to be like super transparent, because we've been batching these. And I think, when did we create our first batch of these episodes?
In December?
No.
Before then?
Oh my goodness. No, it was like summertime, because remember it was before we did the...
it had to have been either end of August or beginning of September.
Yeah, and so now we're filming like the first day of February,
right.
Our third batch of episodes. We launched the podcast in January. We're going to kind of talk about that time right before launching and what went into that. But at the time of this recording, we're at 13,000 downloads in less than 7 days. Like, holy cow, that's pretty awesome. So we're really excited about that. So how does that feel?
I think it's just, I don't even know how to put it into words. I'm just so pumped.
I would love to know, just a side note, what are some awesome things that have happened in your life, Phoebe, since we first, started episode 1, which I'm going to assume was August?
Yeah. I think, one of the main things was just a change in direction for my business. Things that I've just taken bigger leaps of faith as far as where I was going, in my business. I've totally changed directions and shifted away from one-on-one client work and in a direction that just feels so much lighter for me. And, you and I have partnered on another thing, which is the mastermind. I think we'll talk a little bit
about that today.
Yeah.
You also moved and got a new place.
Moved to San Francisco, got a new place.
And this is a big deal because I listened to our episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you listen to
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm not alone on that one. But I was listening to one of our first episodes and it was like, what do you want to create? And you were like, a place to live and like even like a location. You didn't even know where.
Right.
And now let me ask you this. So obviously then we revealed it in one of the later episodes that you're like, I just got my place and now you've been there for like 3 months or something.
Yeah, 2 months, yeah.
What does it feel like knowing that there was a time when you're like, you were literally like, where should I live? I have no idea. You were asking on Facebook and now you're in San Francisco. Like, share with me the difference between that.
I think I've always kind of thrived in instability maybe. So that adventure, that excitement of like, hopefully I'll get a place. So it wasn't ever a concern that I wouldn't have a place. But now it's just really comforting to know that I have a place that I love and I'm excited to go home every day. And it's just this feeling of like, I made it. I did it.
Is it kind of weird to think that there was a time when you didn't even know where you were going to live?
Yeah, it is. It's a little weird.
Because now it's like, well, it's obvious. You've made the right decision.
Right.
But is it even weird to think that there was a time that you were like, I don't know that San Francisco is even a possibility at all?
Right, which it wasn't, I don't think, at the time.
And
anyway.
now like there's no doubt.
Yeah, it is a little bit weird. I know that I've been in that situation before, and I think that's really what got me through it, was like, I know I've been here before. I've moved to a new city where I didn't know anybody and been in a situation where either I didn't have a job or I had just moved overseas or something. So I always knew it was going to be fine, but this one was a little bit different. This was like a really serious move for me to be coming back to the U.S. It did feel a little bit different.
Was there something scary about?
Totally.
What's that?
Because I had originally decided on San Diego. And so I think that was like a big monkey wrench when I decided not to move there. And that's really what the goal of me moving back to the US was going to be, going to San Diego and having that moment where I was like, actually, I don't think this is really the place that I'm going to live. And so it was that moment of doubting myself that I had kind of pinned all my hopes on moving to San Diego.
So was there a fear that you might be making the wrong decision?
Totally.
Okay. And then what about, like, because I know, just to bring this up, San Francisco is a pretty darn expensive city. Yeah. So was there fear around that as well?
Totally.
Okay, so got it. How about now, being there for 3 months? Are you scared living there? Like, are you like, oh my gosh, every day is still scary? Or are you like, I'm so glad I made this decision?
I'm so glad I made the decision.
Interesting. Yeah. So Phoebe had no idea I was going to ask her these questions, but we stay in contact, so I kind of knew what answers were going to come up anyways. And that's a really fascinating thing, and I think that's what we want to talk about in this episode, is this theme that here is Phoebe taking a leap for her to get a new place in a new city, new people, new costs, new everything. And she can acknowledge that it was scary, that making that decision, whether it was throwing down the deposit or signing a contract or throwing a dart on a map and saying, here, that act was scary. But now in hindsight, looking at what those decisions created for her in her life, the results that she have today, she's not in fear. You're not living scared. You're not like, oh, I shouldn't have done it. This is a theme that we've seen coming up, and we really wanted to just pull it apart and look at it and whatnot. So we kind of, Phoebe mentioned that, and this is what we're talking about here today, guys, is that we started creating episodes for this podcast in the summer. It was easy to make the episodes, but what was really hard was to like talk about it or launch it. And it became really, 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 really uncomfortable for me as soon as Phoebe's like, okay, we're live on iTunes. I was like, ooh. And then she would like send me these messages. So like, OMG, my friend just listened to the podcast. And I'm like, I don't want to hear it. It was really uncomfortable for me. I was really scared. I have my stories of like, people are just going to think I'm freaking crazy and this is weird and it's, whatever. And the flip side of it, or after we released it, the feedback has been extraordinary, like beyond what we would have expected. We told you like 13,000 downloads or something like that. But the emails have come pouring in, the Facebook messages, the reviews, the comments, like people are talking about it in Facebook groups. Like I'm just like blown away. And ironically, what that's having me do is not like the first week this was out, I didn't want to promote it. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to share it. And you saw that, right?
Right.
You were
I was
like
the only one doing it.
Talking it up. And I'm the one with like the list and the following. I'm like, maybe if you kind of don't want to, spend too much time, you could listen to my podcast. And then finally we're like, screw it, let's do it. And that was the scariest thing, was pressing send on an email to a subscriber list of 166,000 people, letting them know I got this podcast. And I even titled it like hardest email to write ever, #awkward. And it was really hard to let people know. And then obviously we have the results on the other end. And we have another example of this. I'm trying to show you the themes. So the other one is that for years I've wanted to do a mastermind. High level, high paid group of extraordinary individuals, business owners, entrepreneurs, that we can work together, collaborate, support each other, hold each other accountable, brainstorm, and help get to that next level. And for years, people told me, don't do it. It's too much work. It's not worth it, blah, blah, blah. And I still felt that burning desire to do it. Phoebe was actually out here recording episodes. I'm like, what if we start a mastermind? And there was this moment in time where we're looking at the calendar. It was coming up on Christmas, and we're like, if we don't do it now, we have to wait until the new year because the holidays are right around the corner. And we like kind of took this like deep breath, and we're like, now means like it meant tonight.
Right. We were like, how many days would it take us to do this? I'm like, well, working backwards, we'd have to send the email in like 2 days or something. It was like,
it was the next morning.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah. But there was like a series of 3 emails, and the first one would have to be the next day. And we're like, okay, let's go. And holy cow, I was scared to death. A lot of fear about what if no one signs up? What if, even worse, if no one signs up? What if like only one person signs up? A lot of fear around that. And sure enough, it was the lightest, easiest, most fun, incredible experience. The group that we created from that mastermind has been extraordinary. This is a high level $20,000 to $25,000 ticket seat experience. and we had to turn people away, which was challenging to only choose 12 from the people who applied. But here is this other experience, this theme that's coming up that we want to dissect and talk about, which is you want to do something, there's a fear around it, freaking do it anyways, and the result is amazing.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about the podcast, for me, the real fear around it was actually sitting in front of the microphone. It had nothing really to do with like what we were talking about. It was just sitting here listening in my little headphones to my own voice saying in my head, oh God, you sound stupid. Don't say that.
Shut up, Phoebe.
Exactly.
Why are you talking?
And so once I got it out and once we had done our episodes, I had no problem promoting it. And so I think that it was a nice like seesaw where like you had no problem sitting in front of the microphone and chatting because that's what you do and that's what you're an expert in. And then
but letting people
right. And so at least I was there to be like, well, screw it. Let's just promote it and let's see what happens. And same with the mastermind, the high ticket item, all that stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, like my fear was around who am I to do this? What am I doing? Am I going to be able to contribute? And and all those fears around it. But the whole process has just been so easy, and you were saying just really fun. We've gotten to know so many more people, and I love taking, because even in Real Marketing Insider, we get little snippets of people's businesses, but here we're taking it full on, and I love that, and having that balance, which I'm not used to right now because I had gotten rid of my one-on-one clients. So having that opportunity, that was, for me, the scary part was my contributions as opposed to like the promoting it and the fun process and all of that.
But then now you do it and it's not scary anymore.
No.
Okay, so this is what this episode is about. It's an inquiry into this question of what is this thing that we label as fear? What is its purpose? Because here are 3 examples: moving to a new city, launching a podcast, selling out a mastermind, that your hosts, yours truly, had an experience of having fear, like action debilitating fear, like not wanting to move forward, but doing so anyway and seeing results. So like, some people are like, well, yeah, duh. But for a moment, you really have to like think about that. Why, if the result of the action is positive on all 3 of these examples, and I'm sure everyone listening can think of a time in their life when they had a fear. Maybe it was like singing, coming out on stage at your school play or something, where there was fear, you did it anyway, and the result was great. Why was there fear? And this is a real inquiry I want to have into this. What is that? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. So what is it?
Yeah. And well, one thing I was going to say about it is just that so often I think in our lives, we bump up against some sort of fear and then you kind of crumble and you're like, well, yeah, maybe that's a sign.
That's where we stopped.
Exactly.
Yes. And what you're saying about maybe this is a sign is I know that there are people out there, and I'm going to call you out, who are like super on the spiritual woo-woo side, which we love to say like we're that, but we also like to make fun of ourselves. But when they feel this fear, they're like, this is the universe telling me this is not the right time, or this doesn't feel right with me, and blah, blah, blah. Now, there are times like that, and I'm not acknowledging that. However, how do we discern the difference? How do we create a distinction between the two? And I don't necessarily know the answer yet. I'm playing in the question of this because I think that is so important. But what I don't want anybody to do is to have a desire to do something, feel fear, and let that stop them because they think that is something, protecting me. However, I do believe that that's exactly what the purpose of the fear is doing. There's a conversation we haven't really had about the concept of the ego, which is the ego is simply trying to protect us. Because if you look at all 3 of these examples, getting a new apartment in a brand new city, launching a podcast to the public, selling a most expensive program or offer I've ever had. These are all examples of risk and putting ourselves out there. And I believe that the fear is coming from an intention to protect us, to keep us safe. That there is a chance that you put yourself out there in a way that you can get rejected, that you're going to look bad, right? Or that you might not like the place that you move to, or it might cost more money. So there is this like piece of you that's trying to protect you and keep you safe. And, a lot of from what I've learned and studied is that we kind of want to acknowledge that fear and perhaps even thank it, but realize that staying safe and not putting ourselves out there is probably not what we want if we are an entrepreneur.
Right.
Like, it's the very nature of it. And so what I want to go ahead and throw out there for everybody is that if you are an entrepreneur, a business owner, that fear is inevitable.
Right.
Fear is totally inevitable. And this reminds me of, you haven't done Tony Robbins' Unleash the Power Within. So one of the things he does is he gives you this piece of paper before you show up, and they, what's your name? And they check you up the list. But before they give you your pass to go get into the room of like 3,500 people, they give you this waiver that you have to sign. And there's this thing at the bottom that says, like, you will not sue for the possibility of CBS, charred bloody stumps. Which is,
oh my God, that's
which
awful.
They then tell you that, yes, tonight at about 10 o'clock, you're going to walk on hot coals and you could suffer from CBS, charred bloody stumps. So, for those of you who have done Tony's event, you get the opportunity to walk on these hot coals. And I just know that for me, that was a breakthrough experience, because there is this moment in time that I still remember to this day, that you are standing in front of the hot coals. It's like 8 feet in length. So you got to do at least like 4 or 5 steps, and there is a line of people behind you. There is a row of people on either side of you looking at you, and there's people at the end of the coals cheering you on. There's no way out of this. Mm-hmm. You can't turn around. You can't say, no. There's someone waiting for you behind you. So you get up to the coals and you feel the fear. Like, if you've never stepped on hot coals, you have no idea what to expect. Right. You have no idea what's coming your way, except you could only imagine charred bloody stumps at this point. And you take that first step. And what I really believe that Tony is doing with that exercise is getting you to feel fear and do it anyway. Mm-hmm. That fear doesn't have to control your life, but also that the walking on the coals was not scary.
Right.
This is a huge piece. Walking on the coals was not scary. Just standing in front of them and thinking about walking on them was scary. Mm-hmm. Crazy. Walking on the coals, you're not afraid while you're walking on them, because you start walking on them and you're like, wait, I don't feel anything. This is weird. You're not like, oh my gosh, I don't feel anything. So a lot of what we do is we put all this fear and effort and whatever on the action we're going to take, putting ourselves out there, launching our this or selling our that or doing your first webinar or whatever. And the actual doing of it, the fear is not present. But that ego, that piece of you that wants to keep you safe, keep you in your little box, is going to do whatever it can to keep you there. And that's where that feeling comes from. And entrepreneurship is about thinking and living outside of that box. And so ultimately our message here, as we have an inquiry into what is this thing as fear, is that fear is inevitable. And if you're not feeling fear, if you haven't done anything in the last 12 months, and even that's a stretch, that had you a little scared, you're simply not pushing yourself enough. You're not reaching your potential. And that's going to sting for people. And I like to say you're not playing big enough, because as Phoebe said, now that she lives in San Francisco, she's not afraid to live there. So she's done that. Check that off her box. Mm-hmm. In fact, if she moved to now San Diego and the cost of living is cheaper and she knew more people, there would be no fear around that. So the fear is also an indicator that we're growing, that we're doing bigger stuff than we've ever done before. So the thing is, what are you talking about? I am living up to my full potential. It's like, no, you're living up to your previous full potential. Now it's time for your next biggest ultimate potential, which we don't know what that is. That's the next evolution of ourselves. We're always growing. It's not like, oh, I'm perfect, I'm complete, I'm done, I can just, if you're not growing, you're dying, right?
Well, and isn't there the phrase where it's like, do something every day that scares you?
Yeah.
And like, but what does that actually mean? Like, how are you supposed to determine what that's going to be every day?
Yeah, and so that's a really great question. I think my answer to that would be asking the question, first, always, what do I want? Right. What do I want? What do I want? And anybody who's saying, I don't know what I want, you do know what you want. I'm going to call BS on that. But ask the question, what is the essence of what I want? And, sometimes getting what you want is going to be a little scary. You're a guy and you want to fall in love. Approaching a complete stranger, beautiful woman on the street is going to be scary. But that could be your potential wife.
Right.
And you're going to let that pass by because your ego, that version of you that wants to keep you safe, is not going to allow you to get what you want, what you deserve, what you want more than anything. I mean, that's crazy. And so we have to begin to be comfortable with the inevitability that fear is an essential ingredient, an essential piece to you playing a bigger game. There is no way around it. You're going to try and dodge the fear. You're going to try and go around it. You're going to try and find the fearless way, like the route that's not scary and this is easy, and it's gonna find you somehow, some way.
I was gonna say, as soon as it's one of those, if you don't learn the lesson, it's gonna keep coming back and keep manifesting itself in a different situation, but it's gonna keep slapping you in the face. So you have to deal with it at some point. And all across your life, as entrepreneurs, we are risk takers. That's what we do. And I think that sometimes in certain aspects of our life, we think that, we're being really risky, or, we're taking big chances or big leaps. But then we have another area of our life where we're not doing the same. And it's just that inconsistency. I certainly can see in my own life, moving to a new city, like that probably would be really scary for people. It is a little intimidating, but I think that's what I'm good at. As opposed to maybe relationships or, other things in my life that maybe I'm, when I do a gut check, I realize actually I'm not taking risks. I'm not playing as big as I should. And I think there is a big distinction there and just for people listening, where are you playing small? It might not be in your business. Maybe you are a big risk taker, but at home, you're not taking those risks. And I think that that's important to kind of take a step back and realize, this is where I am playing big and this is where I'm playing small.
Yeah, so again, this is just such a great topic, because I think even for myself, I think for the longest time, and especially if we go too far down this woo-woo hole where we're like, everything has to be all like positive, okay? That means like, it can't be scary, and it has to be like, things can be easy and scary at the same time. Like going on a roller coaster is really easy. It can be scary, but it's also easy. You're not doing a lot of work. You're just sitting there. And both these podcasts and Mastermind were very easy from the standpoint of the work and effort and energy that went into them. There wasn't this uphill battle of pushing. It was just resistance. It was just a feeling of fear. So I think that's really important. And to expect that, to be okay with that, to just be with that. And, even to just turn this into an exercise, I think the best thing I would do is write down 10 things that scare the crap out of you. And it could be something as like dying. I think that's fine. But, since we're talking business and we're entrepreneurs here, I think we can get really specific. And maybe it's something like public speaking. Maybe it's something like emailing an influencer or reaching out to an influencer. Maybe you want to get on their podcast show, or you want them to promote you or something. That's made me nervous before, just reaching out to someone. We're going to get a lot of people signing up or emailing us about the podcast. I know. Doing a webinar, right? Putting yourself out there on live something. Maybe it's even just like Periscope or Facebook Live. Creating your product, your course, putting your name on something. Putting yourself out there, even if it's just like your first video. We deal with that a lot when I'm doing my YouTube and video marketing training. People just putting themselves out there on their very first video is scary. Write that down. Just write down a list of all the things that are scaring you. And here's the thing. If you're like, nothing scares me, you're not playing a big enough game. So you got to find where are the things that are going to scare you. Because there are things that scare me. They're the next level of things for me. Like we're talking to publicists and PR reps about TV and radio. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, I don't know if I could be on like some like news or morning show talking, I'm not there yet. Like that comes up for me. And, I think the first thing is identify it, get present to it, and thank it. Like acknowledge it and appreciate it. This is your ego or whatever you want to call it, trying to protect you. But what is it really protecting you from? Because when you have a desire to do some real cool shit in the world, it's not really protecting you. And we already know, because we've talked about this in previous episodes, but critics, haters, negativity is inevitable no matter what we're doing. We get it. You're going to get it. And, as long as you're true to what your message is and what you want to create, what you're putting out there, you can't let that stuff debilitate you. Well, and what haters do you know that are playing a big game? Yeah. Yeah. And, Brene Brown has a great series of conversations around this about, this is about playing the game in the arena. And if you're not in there yourself getting bloodied and beaten up and getting your hands dirty, then I'm not interested in your opinion. If you're up in the stands being a critic, I'm not really interested in your thoughts. And it's so funny because I'm a big movie buff, and I always check IMDb, which is like the movie like resource in their rating system. At the same time, I can't stand it because everyone really is a critic. You know, I went to film school, so I know a fraction of what it really takes to create an extraordinary film.
Right, but that's a one time you get to really voice your opinion because...
But people are just like, the script was so lackluster and the blah, blah, blah. And it's like, come on, people. Anyways, that's my little side thing. So this is great. It's a great conversation. But ultimately, the takeaway here is that you can't avoid this fear if you want to step into a bigger version of yourself. If you want to play a bigger game, the fear is inevitable. It's your job to start to become comfortable and accepting of the fear and living through it and not letting it stop you. Just like I was standing in front of hot coals, felt scared to death, and I did it anyways. What is it that you want to do? How do you want to put yourself out there? What's that next step for you? No matter how scary it feels, do it anyway.
Right. When you're talking about your fears, like, you know, public speaking or being on a podcast, you know, for me, it wasn't that it was a little bit that I was afraid I was going to sound stupid or whatever, but it's really my considerations or my perceptions of somebody else's perceptions. Yes. You know, it's how I think I'm going to be perceived.
We're worried about what others are thinking of us.
Which is just so crazy.
We can't control that anyway.
Yeah, and that like rules my life. That's going to keep me small. No, like that's just so ridiculous. So I know that you were saying number one was to write down the list of 10 things. Yeah. And then what would be your next steps?
So write down the 10 things that scare you, even just a little bit. And what I would do is like number the top 3. Mm-hmm. What are the biggest ones that are just like, you know, and they're usually a means to the end. They're not the end. Like, it's like, I want to write a best-selling book. Doesn't scare people, but maybe like getting, you know, whatever you call it, to get requests for a publisher or, you know, once the book's written, like getting on a talk show, that type of stuff is the stuff that scares you. So it's usually the means to the end that's scaring us. And we try and avoid it. So we're like, well, maybe I'll do it some other way. And maybe I'll just self-publish that or something, you know, maybe I just won't promote it. Maybe I'll just write such a good book that everyone's going to find it and love it anyways. You know, so I'd really look at your top 3. And I think the number one thing here is acknowledge and accept the fears instead of like trying to avoid them, trying to bury your head in the sand and say they don't exist. That, you know, there are no weeds type attitude. And even have like show gratitude that those fears are there. Because at the end of the day, like when I ask that question, what is this thing that we call fear? Why was I afraid to launch a podcast that was ultimately successful and has helped people? Mm-hmm. The only answer that I can come up with is that there was a version of me, call it your ego, that wanted to protect me.
Right.
And so it's just like a mom who yells at their child because they're in the car and they unbuckle their seatbelt and they're bouncing around, and the mom turns around and yells at the child, says, "Sit down and put your seatbelt on." The mom isn't a mean parent for yelling at the child. Mom was just so loving and caring. She wanted her child to be safe. And I believe that's what's going on here. I believe that it's just part of you that wants to protect you, that wants to keep you safe. The irony, though, the walking, talking contradiction is that us as entrepreneurs doing and creating new things, you can't have both. Mm-hmm. You can't sit in your little box, safe and protected, away from the world, and be a best-selling author.
Right, and grow.
You can't have impact and put your stuff out there to the world without actually doing it. Fact. Right. Yeah. So this has been a fantastic inquiry and conversation, and I encourage you guys to do this exercise. Look at things in your life that are scary. It doesn't mean go out and do them right away, but at least acknowledge them and start there, that we all have things. And if you don't, look for the next level of things. Crank it up a notch so you can find things that do scare you just a little bit. I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in and downloading, subscribing to episodes. If you haven't left a review for us on iTunes yet, I would love so much for you guys to leave a review. We're looking at every single one of them. We so appreciate it. We'll have a link in the show notes to make it real easy. Or if you're in the podcast app, you can leave a review there.
And also, when you start to do your 10 things, go ahead and go check out mindyourbusinesspodcast.com and go ahead and leave us a comment and let us know what your 10 things are. What are you scared of? Because we do also take a look at those as well.
And I do recommend you guys doing that, because the more you do that, the more you'll see that other people, most people, are scared of the same darn things. What the heck are we all afraid of? I'm James Wedmore.
I'm Phoebe Mroczek.
And we'll see you on the next episode. Are you frustrated that no matter how hard you hustle, no matter how much you get done in a day, you still feel like you have little results to show for it? Do you feel like you're doing everything right, but there's still something missing? Well, what if there was an easier way? What if your business could be fun, effortless, and profitable? Phoebe and I have put together a free audio MP3 for you, compiling the 77 business affirmations for creating success from the inside out. And we want to give it to you absolutely free. This is your chance to rewire your brain for bigger results in your life and your business. To get instant access absolutely free, simply visit 77affirmations.com. That's the number 77affirmations.com.